So about finding this lost island, before we start looking at the donors and our relationship with them, is to explore a bit more what are the conversations happening inside our organizations. PAX gets a lot of money from the Dutch government, long-standing relationship. At the same time, PAX has filed a lawsuit against the Dutch government with other organizations to get the Dutch government to stop, if I'm not mistaken, supplying spare parts for F-35 planes in Israel.
I think for PAX, the internal debates are marked by three, let's say, landmark events. And that's the invasion of Ukraine, that's the 7th of October, and the war in Gaza, and that's the outcome of the Dutch elections last year. And all of these landmark events, let's call them that, for lack of a better term right now, have led us to reflect on our principles and how we act upon them. For the invasion of Ukraine, we are in favor of arming Ukraine because the Ukrainians need to be able to defend themselves. For that, we are in line with what the Dutch government's position is. On the Gaza war, we take a very different position. We've taken the Dutch state to court. We don't know where that will end up, but it hasn't made us very popular. As for the Dutch elections and what you just sketched about civil society and autonomy, this is very much in flux at the moment in the Netherlands. Cuts have been announced for the development cooperation budgets that are really severe. We are also bracing ourselves for what that means.
I want to come to you, Sergio. Your organization has been at the forefront of thinking on issues of what does global solidarity mean? Are you feeling the pressure?
I would like to start by saying that we speak from a privileged position at the Justicia because the Justicia is in a good financial position at the moment. And I must say that we have had no attempts to censor us for the work we do from our funders so far. That is not to say that the current global situation and other events, for example, with our work in Venezuela, have not triggered reflections on the need to think about ways to diversify and protect our funding from possible changes in the funding landscape. When we published the joint statement with Landscapes of Hope, asking international actors to exert all possible pressure on the Israeli government to end the siege of Gaza, early after the events of October 7th. And then we published our own position in the Justicia. It sparked an internal discussion and several reactions externally as well took place if we compare with other international statements. We use the word genocide, and you can imagine how an organization of lawyers and board members concerned with the reception of that within an EU audience, including funders. We have an internal seminar to discuss about that statement, the implications, where the ED and other people from the directive team shared very openly the concerns, and everyone at the Justicia was able to share their positions on the matter. We definitely see decentralization of power within organizations, at least in the Justicia's example, in that regard, and I appreciate how that allows us to keep an principle-based position on the matter.
I want to get to the second act, which is really about sustainability and autonomy. What are acceptable compromises?
There's a lot of unlearning that we need to do, ideas that we need to be exploring so that we put ourselves as cultural institutions in the mode of taking actions. We need to redefine what success means. We measure success by growth. So what are really the benchmarkers that we put for our success, other than the ones that we've been using from the model of the Global North institutions? As civil society organizations in most parts of the Arab region, we are put in a place where we have to play so many roles. We try to fill the gap for public sector, the private sector. We also operate in silos, more or less. I mean, we're trying, and we've been trying to connect the dots in order to be part of a wider ecosystem. We're not yet able to see how our roles could be complemented so that, then the relation between the big tent and the small tent becomes something of competency and not competitiveness. There is a breach in trust. We are players in this field, and you pretend to give us the agency to do the work that needs to be done based on the assumption that we are aligned in purpose.
In the meantime, can we push back, equalize a bit, reestablish trust?
We've been reflecting and talking in groups, smaller ones, bigger ones, about such things, but nothing materialized. And then when you come under pressure or under attack, you have to solve all of these problems. One of the legitimate questions is the current existing system of funding that we've been operating with. Does it allow for a new mindset that have to be more about, at this point, about equity, or is it inherently exploitative?
In Colombia, what do you see as sort of the main fault lines for pushing for more sustainability and autonomy in the decision making?
And I think that it's very important to connect the dots between different struggles. And I would like to come back for a second to the discussion on the global horror and what's going on in Palestine for explaining what do I mean. Petro said back in October, just a few days into Israel's onslaught, in a long message that he published in social media, that Israel's genocide campaign should be understood as the response of a global system of power, and not only from one state against an entire population, but a system of power that is ready to respond with that to defend the bubbles in which rich countries are living in different dimensions. A country can be safe by creating a sort of wall that cannot be penetrated even by your neighbors that you consider your enemies next to you, you know? And that's the way rich countries in the West are thinking not only about their military and defense systems, but also, for instance, about the climate crisis.
What does tomorrow look like from where you're sitting?
How can we center the voice and the imagination of artists as tools that are really indispensable? Times are changing, and probably giving more space and more time and more tools to much younger generation to see, to listen to what they have to say, and what solidarity means to them, what production means to them, what support means to them. To think of culture not as a product, but as a front, to steer away from, always the output of what we're supporting, what we're doing, to a more people-centered, process-centered approach.
If we're talking about funders and donors, to recognize the value of the process, and the need to invest in people and not in arms, and to invest in the resilience of people, because it is really valuable to plant seeds so that they're there when there's the opportunity to do something with that. And I'd really like to see the Dutch government to come to their senses. That's a big dream.
No, I think it's very important to inhabit contradiction, or make of contradiction something transformational. Every time that we talk about funding strategies, we will need to inhabit this kind of contradictions. Institutionally, then, I think that it will be very important to ask ourselves, what does it mean to be a civil society organization in Colombia at a time of global horror, and how that informs our thinking? What solidarity really means in practice for civil society organizations. And Petro said something like, in Palestine, we can see the past, the present, and the future of the global South.